You see, something is going to happen. Something wonderful.
My God, it's full of stars.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. And I am very happy to finally say I got the Oddman back on with us today. We got the Oddman out. It's been way too long. I think we both kind of been busy with our own stuff, so in our own rabbit holes. But I was finally able to get this man back on to talk about a subject I can never get enough about. But before we get to that, I would like to introduce my co-host for this episode. I got Teresa, the spiritual gangster herself. What is up? What's going on? And let everybody know what your deal is in case they don't know who you are.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. So like you said, I'm from the Spiritual Gangsters. It's a fun show where lately we've been breaking down current events on our segment called Clown World Weekly. Lots of fun seeing the news through a tinfoil lens, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I also started a new co-host gig on another Canadian podcast called Midnight Mysteries. So it's very interesting. It's a segment called Things That Go Bump in the Night. And we talk about like cryptids, shadow people, sleep paralysis. Like it's really cool stuff. So if you're into that, come check it out. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely check out that new show that she's involved with.
It's fun.
And check out her Etsy shop if you're interested in one of her badass hats that she's wearing right now. So.
Yeah, this one says based. I wore it for this episode. I had to because I know some of my opinions will qualify under this term, most likely. So, yeah.
All right. And now on to our guest, the man himself, Oddman. What is going on, Oddman? In case this is the first time somebody's hearing about you, could you please just let them know what your deal is and where to find your stuff?
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. I really always enjoy hanging out with you.
Oh, yeah, man.
It's been too long. Yeah, man. I do the odd. Well, it used to be called the Oddcast, and I decided recently to shorten that to just the Odd Man Out because it's a lot easier for people to follow because it had a longer title before. But and I do all kinds of stuff. I like to talk about hidden history. I like to get into secret societies, and the last year and a half or so, I've really gotten into Zionism and Kabbalah and all these things that are connected to it and modern Israel and stuff like that. And the reason I got into that was because a few years ago, I found out that my grandmother was Jewish and I never knew her. So that kind of started just a fascination with me. And I had no idea what I was going to find out. So yeah, everybody check it out. And I appreciate it.
Yeah, something only because I realized it now since somebody said something, if you don't mind me asking you. You play the drums, Oddman?
Well, I don't play the drums. I play guitar, bass, sing. I was in a band for over 10 years called We Are the Conspiracy.
Oh, I think you even sent me some of your music, actually. I totally forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, so if you hear my intro song, that's me. But I don't play the drums, but I play everything else on that. So
okay, yeah. Somebody said they noticed the bitchin' drum set in the back. So I was like, oh God, I didn't even notice.
At first I thought my back door was open because my kid has a drum set back there. So I was like, wait.
That was the first thing I looked. I was like, you cannot see her kid's drum set. And I'm like, oh, they're talking about Oddman.
I know. I was like, oh, Oddman's got one. That's crazy.
I was thinking about that because I was like, I know your kid plays the drums. And I was like, I don't see the drums. What the fuck is that?
I was like, whoa, what's happening right now?
Yeah, right. I thought the
funny.
same shit.
So
Oddman's links, your nice and easy link tree is in the bottom now if anybody wants to go check out your stuff. You also do don't you kind of go on Jack's show a lot as well, don't you?
Yeah, quite a bit. He's really slowed down since he had
obviously.
A kid.
That will happen.
And I really slowed down last year too, especially towards the end of last year. I got kind of burnt out. I think I was going too hard on the subject we're going to be talking about because it gets pretty depressing and dark and it's absolutely endless. So I kind of let those kind of things get to me. But I'm trying to get back into it this year and, hopefully reveal some fun stuff, or maybe not necessarily fun, but at least interesting.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Are kind of fun, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely check out, that's another thing too I was going to say. He also does a lot on Jack Allen's show, so go check that out if you want to see more of Oddman and Jack. And I do. I tell you the truth. I really love like I noticed your style of posting. You know, I really like it now. He's got like his own phrases. I like it. It's good stuff. I think you're doing some good work out there on social media.
I appreciate it, man. I think I may have mentioned this to you even, but I had never, to my knowledge, ever posted any or like tweeted towards Elon Musk, you know, never commented on anything he'd ever said that I remember. And the other day, like two weeks ago or so, I tweeted at him something, you know, because he went over to Israel a couple of weeks ago or whatever and bent the knee and all that stuff. And it was something, I don't even remember what he had said in his post, but I said something derogatory, and it wasn't like anything intense or anything. It was kind of pointing him out to be a hypocrite. And ever since then, man, my audience reach just went down dramatically to now I'm getting like maybe 100 people who see the post, and you can see it. So you know it happened. Yeah. It was immediate. So, you know, it's like I'll craft this. I try to put a lot of thought into what I post most of the time, not always. And it doesn't matter because nobody sees it, you know. Yeah. It's still a controlled environment.
Oh, for sure.
That's crazy.
That's like the, you know, whatever Twitter is, whatever it is, but like that's the one sad thing. And like, you know, not obviously if Elon Musk took it over and it's changed since then, there's an issue with that. But I do have to say, I really do think it's gotten worse when it comes to visibility. You know, it's like you're only going to get seen unless you buy a badge for the most part. Yeah, it's whatever. It is what it is. It's a whole other topic that we could probably talk about for hours, but let's get into Zionism, which I'm sure somehow Elon Musk connects to too anyway, but you know what I'm saying? But like I said to you prior to the show, it has been a while since you've been on. So I'm assuming anything from the last few months or 6 months is rather new for this show. So I don't know where you want to start or how far back you want to go, but I guess like really the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Well, I guess I would just say that once I got to looking into this issue, you know, I mean, I grew up, you know, Protestant. When I was smaller, we went to Baptist churches. So Southern Baptist, you can guess that everybody pretty much was pro-Israel, you know, and it wasn't talked about much. It was just like assumed, you know, and if it ever did come up, you know, obviously it was just all pro-Israel. And I think that leads back to dispensationalism and those kinds of things. But, you know, when I started looking into all this stuff and started finding out like the real history, which has totally been whitewashed, you know, the winners do write the history. And there, you know, thank goodness in any era, it seems like there's a few authors who did write books telling the other side, you know, revisionist history is what we call it, I guess, today. And a lot of those guys had great footnotes and proof of what they were talking about. But, you know, the big publishers who are in bed with the governments, you know, they kill the books, basically. They don't republish them. And then, you know, you've got a limited number of these books, and then the price of them goes up to, you know, a ridiculous amount. So people can't even afford them. Thank God now we got the internet where we can find a lot of these books online.
You know, something I did notice in the past, and I even noticed when I covered Robert Maxwell's medical monopoly. Now, I know when we covered Robert Maxwell, it was more from like the medical aspect of like influencing major publishing companies. And there was, in my opinion, Nazis involved with Robert Maxwell and those companies. But like I have seen them, it's the same major companies that just seem very influential on also deciding what your kids are reading in school up until the point to where they get out of school. I mean, it's just, and you have to start to wonder like how much of our publishing really is controlled. I think it's a lot worse than most people would ever think, and like who actually really owns these companies.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I've had, well, my son's 13, so he's still in school, but I can say my daughters are both out of school. And I can tell you with my experience, they literally read a book about the Holocaust every year in every grade, maybe two. And they know nothing about communism or socialism or the other isms, virtually nothing when they graduate. That cannot be an accident. And also, you know, it's like every year, it seems like maybe every 2 years, there's a blockbuster movie about World War II. And every 6 months, there's a new World War II book or Nazi book, you know, and it's like everyone gets a little crazier and crazier. They can basically say anything at this point and people will believe it. So they've got a monopoly on that, and it's the ultimate boogeyman. So it's the ultimate excuse for, you know, to do a lot of things, because you can compare, say, Trump, you know, he's the next Hitler, but every Republican's the next Hitler and every Democratic president's the next Stalin. So that's nothing new, but it is a way they use those two groups to kind of pit the people against each other and scare each other and get support. So, yeah, definitely, you know, you're talking about the publishing, that guy, Anthony C. Sutton, he wrote, I think he was the one that broke the Skull and Bones information to the public. And he also did an expose on the Trilateral Commission. But I think even before that, he was a part of the Hoover Institute, which is supposed to be conservative, right? So he came out with these books where he found out that America was helping fund the communists in certain ways, selling communist technology, selling them, American companies were selling them products that help them with their weapons or their machines or their vehicles, different things like that. And he was told by the Hoover Institute, no, do not publish these books, do not do these speeches. And he just refused and kept on. And so finally they pretty much forced him out. But, you know, he proved way back then that, you know, our government, even the conservatives, were funding this kind of stuff, and they didn't want it to get out. So he was never able to publish a book under a big publisher after that, and he had to self-publish. And I think, you know, if he would have been given a big publishing deal like a lot of these people, I think that this information would be mainstream, you know, but they didn't want that to come out. So that's just one way that they control information, you know. It's a big way.
Yeah, I was interesting even in the Putin Tucker interview. Putin was saying that like the Nazi movement in Ukraine was like a huge reason why he went into the war. And I was like, I wonder how people would be receptive to hearing this information, feeling like, okay, the big bad Russian is fighting against Nazism, but I'm supposed to hate Nazism. So does that mean therefore I like Russia? You know, it was like such a mind trip for people. I'm like, I wonder if they can like take this in or not, you know? It's wild.
Yeah, like we're forced to be one extreme or the other. You know, you can't take issue by issue, you know, like, and I'm sure you guys realize this, but it's like you have to be a liberal or a conservative. You can't be in between, and you can't take one guy and say, like Elon Musk, you can't say, well, I agree with him on these statements, but then he's got this whole other list of tweets and statements that I hate and I disagree with totally. People can't do that anymore.
No.
It's like, oh,
that is what I think is like, I don't know if this happened organically or what, but it's just like, to me, it's just like, that is something I think in the last like 5-6 years that has just gotten horrible. You have to accept everything, you know, and then if you don't like everything that person says, you're automatically tossed into the other complete opposite end that everybody hates. It is so bizarre how that, like, how did that happen? How did it even happen? Like, I remember going back, you know, back in the day when I first started getting into conspiracy theories, if you were like in the government or somebody of importance or high up, I felt like conspiracy theorists, like, we're biased. It was so much more biased. I mean, not, you know, we weren't playing, you know, non-biased, really. We were not like picking, we were looking at everybody the same. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's just really weird how like all of a sudden, like, I mean, I guess it was kind of like Trump, but like all of a sudden, like Trump or the right became like the right. It's just really weird.
Yeah.
You know, how all of a sudden there was, you know, completely perfect people in these situations that were going to save us now. I don't know.
No, it makes total sense. And, you know, I said, I think even back in 2016 that I felt like Trump didn't come to save the right, you know, the right-leaning conservative side. I think he came to destroy it. Now, maybe that wasn't his original intention. Maybe it's just the elites are so intelligent as far as their way of using propaganda and psychology and reverse psychology in the media to manipulate any leader. But, you know, I can't help but think that the way that they have used him to make him look like, and I kind of equate this, maybe people get mad at me, but Israel has permanent victim status because of World War II.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter what they do and how bad they do, how bad they act, how many Palestinian babies they kill, they've got that permanent victim status. And so they're always right.
Yo, they could do anything. You'd be like, but the Holocaust.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, let's just be real. I mean,
and
I've even wondered, is that all even by design to begin with?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, it's really, I feel like they've done that to Trump with all these things that he's been attacked in the media. Now he has permanent victim status as far as the conservatives are concerned. So he can do no wrong,
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And Fox News pushes that shit hard.
Yeah. And Newsmax.
Yeah.
Or actually it's my wife's grandparents, but they watch Newsmax and I've seen bits and pieces of it. And, they're like, we don't like Fox. We don't like them anymore. We don't trust them and all this. And so Newsmax is billed as the Fox alternative, right? But if you look at Chris Ruddy went to school at Hebrew University. He's won the Zionist Hero Award from the Zionist Organization of America.
Stop.
He was on a board with Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski, which are like, they were the poster boys for globalism up until, a few years ago. And this guy's so deep state, it's crazy. He's best friends with Bill Clinton. And people, I'm like, why would you trust this guy and think he's conservative? He's admittedly open about liking Bill Clinton and being buddies with him. But that's kind of like, that's conservative media there. People don't really care as long as you're saying, oh, those shit libs, look how bad they are. As long as you're pointing to the libs and saying bad things about them, your guy can do anything, and you won't even say anything about it. It's like, that's why I say, like, I think we're screwed over by our own parties worse than we are the opposition, because we're always watching the opposition, and I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, I think you kind of nailed it with that for sure. Yeah, he definitely has victim status now, and yeah, it's like he can do no wrong. I watch, like, sometimes, I'll put on Fox, and it's almost like, I hate to say it, and it's almost like sometimes when Jesse Waters is on, it's almost like he's getting off on, like the big bully's getting away with whatever he wants. It's hard to explain. It's almost as like they, think his dumb shit is actually cool now. Mm-hmm. It's hard to explain, but I'm just like, this just seems to be getting worse and worse.
Well, and speaking of Trump, as far as in the Zionist Organization of America, they gave him the Theodore Herzl Award a few months ago, maybe a year ago now. And that's like their highest award. He's always been very close to, I call it the Jewish mafia there in New York, because you know how it is. I mean, they control a lot of stuff there. It's just the way it is. It's just a lot of money and a lot of control there. And so I don't think you can be real successful unless you kind of buddy up with that group. But you look at all of his top appointees, or most of them. You look at Bannon. He himself said at the Zionist Organization of America, this seems to be where the conservatives really buddy up with that lobby. He said there he's a Zionist. David Friedman was another appointee of his. He's been there at the Zionist Organization of America, hardcore Zionist. You look at, well, he wasn't in the administration, but Mark Levin, the radio show host.
Oh, God.
He won the Zionist Organization of America Award, or the Zionist Hero Award, excuse me. Glenn Beck, same thing. He is a self-appointed Zionist. He says he's a Zionist. It just goes on and on. Huckabee. It's just crazy. Tom Cotton, he's one of the biggest promoters of this genocide, and he was funded in the millions by AIPAC, which is the biggest Zionist lobby. And, he's been given another award as well by the Zionist Organization of America. DeSantis was given an award by them. I mean, all your guys are in bed with these people in these organizations whose sole aim is to build up another country. So it's like, these guys are, to me, they're traitors. I mean, what else could you call that?
Yeah. Why would you be so pro another nation? Like, I don't know.
remember when we had Bush and Kerry going at it, and it's like either way you're gonna get a bonesman.
Mm-hmm.
It's like even with Trump and Biden, if they both make it to the right, and actually go against each other, Trump, like you were saying before, I mean, he's been involved with it, and a few times, and I think recently again, Joe Biden decided to just throw out there that his father has even considered them Zionists and said, son, you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. Right. So it's just like, we're both getting one anyway.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Either way, right? Jeez.
It's like, and I've noticed this because, like, you got the left side of Zionism and the right side of Zionism, and it's different in Israel than it is in America, and it's really hard to understand. I've tried to kind of like break all that down, but you got like J Street, that's another lobby, and they're the more liberal Zionist lobby, and they're a little more like less on war and stuff like that, which is good at least. And so Soros has kind of backed them, but AIPAC, the more conservative side of the lobby, they have both sides. Like they have all the top Democrats and all the top Republicans, and they're even getting into local elections now. And you don't really go anywhere if you don't bend the knee to AIPAC, and I think that's why Bernie Sanders, he refused to do it. And you see what happened to him, and he was like winning. So same thing with Ron Paul. He was one of the few guys that wouldn't bend the knee to them. And he was also winning, and Fox was even against him. I remember I would listen to, I was real conservative back then. I would listen to Hannity and Limbaugh and stuff like that, and they hated Ron Paul. They made him out to look like a nut, and you look back, and he was right about just about everything. Even if you don't trust him or think he's got some shady ties, I mean, a lot of the things he said have come true, so
yeah,
we don't really have any representation. I mean, it's just ridiculous to think that we do. I mean, at this point. And I think people can't give the dream up. They have this kind of Pollyanna dream of us having this resistance and, thinking back to the founders. But if you look at what our reps do, they do the opposite of what the founders said to do. So it's really a strange time.
Something I did want to ask you, and it's okay if you don't have like an answer that you can like give easily, because I have asked this before, and like even me, I really don't know if I could give like a real definite answer to this. But like, what is Zionism to you, or like, and what you also think is like the end game for Zionists? What is their means? Yeah,
that's kind of the $1 million question,
right? Because everybody's like, it's almost like I can see it, but you don't know how to explain it.
Yeah. Well, originally, mostly Zionism was secular, so it didn't have a religious connotation to it. And the Zionists were, and this is one of the things that I think needs to be more widely talked about. Most of the leaders of Zionism were Eastern European. They were socialists and communists. And that was a big part of what formed the modern Israel. And these guys basically just, like Theodor Herzl's known as the father of Zionism, and he was an atheist, and but he had the idea of, he was kind of like, he was more reasonable than a lot of the other Zionists at the time, because they had offers to have an Israel in Uganda, in part of Texas, in like several other countries, and they turned it down because they wanted Palestine, because they believed that's their homeland. That's, but he was willing to make deals, and he was even willing to say, let's convert to Catholicism, but we'll agree to, we'll adhere to the laws. If they give us a place to live, we'll go by the rules and stuff like that. I can't prove this, it's just hearsay, but I kind of feel like maybe he was taken out because he died in his 40s, I think 47. And he came against the other leaders of Zionism. And to me, Zionism, they try to say it's like, they'll try to say all kinds of different things nowadays for an excuse. But back in the day, Zionism was just solely, they think that they should have that land. And it wasn't necessarily a religious thing. It was just that they felt like it was their ancestors and it belonged to them. And they should have it. And to me, the way I look at it now is Zionism, like if you're an American, a Canadian, a Brit, you may love your country or, be proud of certain things or the people in certain ways, but you don't just blindly trust your government and your leaders and everything they do. But the Zionists, it's like they trust their leaders of Zionism to do whatever it takes to, get to the end goal, which is they want a huge chunk of the Middle East. Theodore Herzl's diary, it had a map in there. I think it's volume 2. And so they wanted Lebanon, part of Egypt, pretty much the whole Levant. I mean, that's what they're going for. They want a huge chunk of the Middle East. And they'll do anything to get it, as we're seeing right now, man. I mean, it breaks my heart, because you see these kids that have been bombed, injured, killed. There's something like over 12,000 kids without parents now. I mean, that's a Holocaust, dude. That's what it is.
Yep. It just seems the term Zionism has become like a badge to do whatever you want with impunity under the name of Zionism, and become the exact thing that you claimed to need protection against initially. So it seems.
Yeah, right? And if back during World War II, the Zionists made a deal. It's called the Transfer Agreement or the Havara Agreement. And what that was, they made a deal with the Nazis that...
I was just going to ask you something about that. That's so funny. Sorry.
That goods could be sold, but goods that Jews owned could be sold. I hope I'm getting this correctly, but I suggest people look it up. But the Nazis would take a cut of it. And so they had that deal going, and it was a huge deal. It was either lose a ton of money or give a percentage to the Nazis and still make a bunch of money. And so that's what they did. And it started to get exposed. But the leaders of Zionism, they've never really cared about what happens to their own people. It's always been about furthering the aims of Zionism. And I can prove that by there's some great books. The Hidden History of Zionism by Ralph Schoenman. He was a Jew himself, but he exposed a lot, and it's a really easy to read book. But he went in there and he kept he documented a lot of quotes by the leaders of Zionism, and they were refusing to let certain immigrants go to the United States or Britain. And even though they were saying you can come here, because they didn't want old people. They said these old people, they're going to die. They're not going to further our aims. We want younger people. And so they were turning that down. And they wanted people who were young, who could fight, because they had it planned out that they were going to attack the Arabs as soon as they got the land. That was already planned. Especially Britain, had offered numerous times to take in the children, because, children being affected by the war, they were dying and starving and all kinds of stuff. And they turned that down time and time again, because the children weren't old enough to fight, so, and they said openly, we're afraid that the Brits will convert them to Catholicism. So rather than save their kids and have them possibly convert, a lot of kids died, and they weren't just dying from being killed. They were living in these camps that were just filthy and disease-ridden. And the Zionists kept them in there. And so it's just unbelievable, the history that we do not know. And I think a lot of us have seen certain people from either the IDF or the Israeli government talk about how they think that there was a stand down. They let that attack happen on October 7th because everybody knows that their security system is the best around, and there's no way that these guys could come in hang gliders and them not know this stuff. Come on. It was, Israeli military people have said that would take a year or more to plan, and they have intel on the ground everywhere. So, They wanted something to happen so they could do exactly what they're doing. And it's not going to stop in Palestine. They want Lebanon. They're dropping bombs in Lebanon, Syria. I mean, they're going for it. So,
Yeah, it's crazy. They keep calling it Israel's 9/11, right?
God.
And I'm like, yeah, because it's their own government doing it to justify a war. It is literally like 9/11, not for the way the media is calling it, but for the real reasons. It's crazy.
yeah, I think I may have mentioned on the other show we did about the religious connotation, the religious aspect of them conquering. Because if you look at the guys, the Orthodox Jews and the Reformed Jews now too are deeply into Kabbalah. And what I didn't realize was, they say that the Zohar was the first book, Kabbalistic book in their eyes, but they also have the Sefer Yetzirah, which is kind of like a mystical interpretation of creation, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And but there's actually 16 different Zohars that have been written over the years, and
It's a huge, extensive read.
and
Yeah,
these
and that's
guys,
very Kabbalistic. All that stuff is very much based off of like Kabbalah.
yeah, and they do believe they say they believe in the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, but they believe that it can have any interpretation whatsoever. There's endless interpretation, so it, they can say it means whatever they want it to mean at any given time. And they have this twisted prophecy in the Zohar, the first Zohar, about Edom and Esau. And they say that Edom, which they consider is the West, Christianity, Rome, the Catholic Church, all that, they say that that's the descendants of Edom and Esau. Of course, the brother Esau was against Jacob. They consider themselves Jacob. Everyone else is Esau. And they say that Edom and Esau must fall. But first, they're going to use Edom to destroy Ishmael, which is the Muslims. So they're using us in the West to destroy Islam, or so they think. And then we have to be destroyed because we have to fall so they can have their Moshiach, their Messiah in Israel. And they'll rule the world from Israel, the whole entire world, and every Jew will have 2,800 non-Jews under his beck and call to teach Torah to. And this is a prophecy. They believe this stuff. And I've seen these rabbis talking about this. I saw another one just yesterday where a rabbi was prophesying the Twin Towers would fall. And this was before the Twin Towers. So the deeper you get down this rabbit hole, the darker it gets, the scarier it gets. And
It's freaky. That's weird.
you see why the term synagogue of Satan is thrown around. It is biblical, but there's some really dark. It's almost like we'll do anything to preserve ourselves and to health everybody else.
Have you seen the documentary Oddman called "You Are Amalek"?
No, I've seen that going around, but I haven't watched that.
You should watch it. I haven't seen the whole thing, but it's sort of similar to Europa, The Last Battle, if anyone's watched that. So it is very like pro-white. It is very anti-Semitic. I'll just preface by saying that. But there are some interesting points raised. So it's sort of like you're saying, the concept of using Esau and Edom against each other, but in the sense of like using the mass refugee crisis, mass migrant crisis to basically annihilate white culture. And the only race left that will be pure is the state of Israel, because they don't allow for that sort of migration to occur. So basically to dilute every other culture except their own and have us all destroy each other.
Well, I've seen
Happy
these
days.
rabbis, Orthodox rabbis. I've seen video clips of them actually saying very similar things and laughing that, Europe's already done for, and Edom's next, and they talk about the migrant crisis being the reason that Europe is done for.
Well, and who's behind the migrant crisis? That's a good question to ask.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, I mean, this is not the only reason, but America's been fighting their wars for, well, at least since the 80s, late 80s, early 90s.
Hmm.
And a lot of that has caused, like I was looking into the deaths from and these are estimations, so it may be even more from the war on terror, in the millions. Something like 5 million or so. And that's probably a lowball estimate, but like the displacement is unbelievable. We're talking about almost 40 million people displaced. And I don't even know if that's considering some of the more modern stuff, because that was from 22, I think. But you think about that many people being displaced, of course, that's going to cause migration and refugees and all kinds of horrible things. And people are going to get desperate, and desperate people commit crimes. And I mean, it's pure chaos. It's what it's causing. And so, our foreign policy, I don't think anyone can prove to me that we, in the Middle East anyway, had an end goal that made any sense. It was just pure chaos. And it didn't, I mean, you look at Libya, what we did in Libya, the way we pulled out of Afghanistan, and I believe recently the Biden administration's been bombing again in Iraq, saying that they're bombing Iran targets or whatever. So
I remember when how they kept like dragging it out any minute now, something's, we're gonna whatever. And it was real interesting how it happened right after the stock market closed too. We couldn't fuck that up. We had to wait for that to end before we dropped bombs. But so I'm like, I wasn't thinking at first. Obviously, if you hit Iran, the country itself, that could really look like an act of war. But once I started hearing shit on the TV, I'm like, all right, so we have a problem with these terrorists that Iran is backing. Why are we bombing 2 other countries that's not Iran?
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, I understand they could be there, but I was just like, this is real convenient if we just wanted reasons to drop bombs on 2 other countries.
Yeah.
I was just like, yo, this is shady shit to me.
Well, in another way, you think about it, you got to get rid of those old bombs so you can buy new ones and spend billions on that.
We'll toss the old crap over there.
Right.
As we make room for the new shit.
God.
Oh man. Yeah. So this is a thing that I thought was interesting, because you had mentioned that the Amalek documentary. So on Purim, that's one of their holidays, they recite Exodus 7:14, where it says that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And they repeat that. And on another holiday, I think this one actually might come before Purim, it's called Shabbat Zakor. They recite, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And so this is a huge deal to them. They talk about it in the Zohar and other books. And pretty much, it depends on what rabbi you listen to, but the Orthodox rabbis, it's like they seem more reasonable, the ones from the United States, but some of them. But if you see the ones in Israel, a lot of those guys are really bloodthirsty.
Yeah.
And they talk about pretty much their idea is anybody who comes against them whatsoever are considered Amalek, like all our enemies are Amalek. And so if that's true, and you're saying we need to blot out Amalek completely, then anyone they see as an enemy, you got to go, man, unless you're going to bend the knee. So pretty interesting stuff. I mean, they're like the only ones who can be racist as hell. And
Right? Yeah.
it couldn't be more blatant, And I will say there are some Jews who are against this kind of stuff, and they've had a lot of protests in Israel against Netanyahu and the government there. And he's like, the government there is hardcore right wing. They're basically our version of skinheads, if you will. I mean, you've got the Israel Power Party, which is like the far right party. And then you've got Likud, which was Netanyahu's party. And that was already a right-leaning party, but it was actually put together by, I think originally by Vladimir Jabotinsky, who was like the founder of revisionist Zionism. And so he was infatuated with fascism. And he came in and he went against the communist and the socialist Zionists way back in the day. And he said, we don't need to do this stuff, kind of politically. We need to take it by force. And that's what they did. They moved towards Jabotinsky's ideas, and that's what they go by today. Yeah, he was fascinated with fascism. They called him the little Hitler or the little Mussolini. And he even went over and took his troops. I think they were called the Beitar troops, if I remember correctly, over to one of Mussolini's bases in Rome to train. So a lot of people don't realize that they've had a connection to fascism for a long time. And I think that that's what they resemble now more than anything, even though, people are going to say you're crazy because of World War II, that's their MO. That's what they kind of go by.
I wanted to ask you, I guess, there's a couple of things I wanted to say to that. Real quick, even stuff with Netanyahu. I've seen some things that, like, I think at one point he was looking to, or Israel, they might have been looking to, like, kind of make, I don't know if it was Christianity or Catholicism, like, illegal. They were looking to do that before the war. And I remember, like, I had this kid, Adam, I can't remember. Oh, I was on his show. He was, like, on InfoWars, and he had me on. And real, like, I do believe he's actually, like, a practicing Jew. He understands the Jewish Kabbalah very, very well. He's very, like, spiritual, too. And he was even saying that, like, he was starting to question, and this was probably 2 years ago, he was starting to question Netanyahu because he's like, he seems to be, like, doing some, like, shady shit that would kind of go along with deep state stuff, quote unquote. And, he was just saying that to me, I think, off the air, and him and some other guy that he knew, they were both actually, like, saying that, like, something seems off with that. And, you do hear about, I don't know how truthful it is, but I have come across stuff where they've, like, shown, like, that there has kind of been, like, protests and unrest in that country due to, like, some of the things Netanyahu wanted to start implementing. And then it's like all of a sudden now, now we have this fucking issue and this war. It just seemed like very weird, or maybe, like, it was just convenient for that moment as well.
Yeah, actually, man, last January, not this past, but the one before, they had a new government, and that's when those two political parties, they kind of merged, and people were freaking out about it because they want to get back to the Talmudic laws and, like, extremely strict, basically Sharia. I equate it with Sharia laws, except with the Jews, you got 613 mitzvah or laws that they talk about. And then there's sub laws. Nobody could ever follow that many laws in your lifetime. It's impossible. And there's not one rabbi who's ever been able to do it, but, they expect you to do that, or they act like they do. And so the people push back. There were riots over there. It was some pretty intense protests, and Western media wasn't even covering it. But I watch a lot of Israeli media, and just as kind of an aside, because I watch a lot of Israeli media and, check it out or whatever, I can tell you, man, that our media is more biased towards Israel than their own media. It's unbelievable. Like, they'll actually tell you some real things that make the government look negative over there in their own media. But, with ours, it's very rare.
We're actually censoring the news worse.
Yes, I think so.
That is something that I think, a lot more people should maybe question and wonder. I do think, like, our country itself has a huge censorship on the internet. I don't think we're actually allowed to see a lot of shit that would be available from other countries. Like, how, like, you hear about, like, oh, China's not allowing, them to see certain things. I have guarantee you our country's already done that to us.
Oh, for sure.
Because, like, it's, with all the amount of shit that you see on social media, I just feel like I should be seeing more of other parts of the world, too. And you really don't.
I don't know if it's that you're not allowed, but definitely, like, the algorithm is skewed against you seeing it. Like, for example, if you wanted to go watch an Israeli newscast, you could, or a Russian website, you could. Whereas like now in Canada, a lot of links I click on, I can't see. It just tells me this content is not available in your region, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, seriously? Thanks, Trudeau. Like, it's a little bit disconcerting when that actually the message pops up in your face, like you're not allowed to see. But I know exactly what you're saying, and I agree that for sure United States citizens are very sheltered from seeing a lot of things, for sure. Like even Putin said in the Tucker interview, said the US is the master of propaganda. I agree 100%. I think he was correct in that statement.
I mean, absolutely. You think about it, like Edward Bernays, they call him the father of propaganda. He happened to be Jewish, by the way. And he said in 1928 in his book Propaganda that, he explained in there, it's a brilliant book. I suggest everyone check it out. But like they had already figured out how to completely mind control the masses at that point through the media that they had at the time, which was basically radio. I think obviously newspapers, magazines. I mean, I think that TV had come out at that point, and they were because he actually mentioned that the motion picture would be one of the most powerful agents of propaganda.
Well, they had those newsreels back then. You'd go to the movies to watch the news.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
About that. That was 1928, and that's is that 94 years ago? So if I can't do math, but if they had already figured that out by then, think about how good they are at it now.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The government previously, a few years before that, he'd worked for the Wilson administration, and they had this, because, like a lot of Americans were kind of non-interventionist until that point, and that's what the founding fathers said. Don't get involved in foreign entanglements, and they wanted to talk America into, going into World War I with Britain, and Americans were against it. So they figured out we're going to create this department. We're going to call it the Committee on Public Information, and it's just going to be a propaganda agency. And so Bernays had worked for them, and so I think he honed his skills working for the government, and they knew exactly how to do everything. So it's really scary when you think about it. Like, how we know we've been lied to, but probably on the scale would blow our minds.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
isn't Ed Bernays' nephew the CEO of Netflix, the founder?
Yeah, I think it's his great nephew. Yep, absolutely.
It's like a hilariously ironic plot twist in the game of life. I love that so much.
Oh yeah, and the Nazis used propaganda, his book, to form their type of propaganda, which I think is ironic because he was Jewish, but and they're the ones that get kind of like, and they did have good propaganda, no doubt about it, but they kind of like, when you think about propaganda, a lot of people think about them, but no, Bernays had already perfected it before that, and even before him, this guy Walter Lippmann, also Jewish, he had wrote 2 or 3 books that was basically the precursors to Bernays' book Propaganda. Although I think Lippmann, I will say, he had a bit of a libertarian streak. Like, he kind of come out later and was kind of like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't try to control everyone, and we should keep our independence, personal independence. So I'll give him a little bit of a break, but it's just weird, man. And then you see like Cass Sunstein. He worked for the Obama administration. The Jewish guy, and he said way back in 2008. He wrote a book. I think I've got it back here. It's like conspiracies and I forget the other title, but anyway, he was talking about way back then. He's like, we need to, the government, figure out how we can combat these conspiracy theorists, and we'll get in these chat rooms and we can like do things to change their minds or veer them in a different direction and all those kinds of things. So just from writing that book, you know that they've been doing that, because social media wasn't quite as popular in 2008, but it was moving that way. And now it's blown up, with all these different platforms. So, the government's got all kinds of people working in these platforms, spreading their propaganda and whatnot.
Something I did want to ask, there was another question I was going to ask you earlier, and you just mentioned a few more of them. So I guess obviously there must maybe be a little bit of a connection. But I was going to ask you, I mean, throughout your studies and stuff, and, I'm asking this because sometimes I wonder if there really isn't a difference, or if maybe they just have their different parts to play for the same end game. But did you notice a lot of connections with Nazis and Zionists? Or just connections that didn't make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'll say this. I think it was Eichmann, if I'm not mistaken, Adolf Eichmann, who went over to Israel and stayed for quite a while during World War II. And he even said that if he were a Jew, he'd be a Zionist. So pretty interesting when you think about it. As far as connections, I mean, with the Havar agreement, that was definitely one of those. But I was talking about Jabotinsky, the founder of revisionist Zionism, being a fascist. And the idea was that, I'll say this too. I just happened to remember this. So you had Jabotinsky, he wanted to work with fascists in certain capacities because he's like, we've got the same views. We want to get our Jews over to Palestine and you want to get rid of Jews. So it was a partnership in that way. I think it was Avraham Stern. He was the leader of the Stern Gang, which was a terrorist organization during mandated Palestine there in controlled by Britain. And Stern tried to work with Nazis as well, tried to make agreements with them for that same reason. So I think that the similarities would be in their tactics and the way they wanted to handle things by force, because you look back at the Stern Gang, and I think it was the Irgun. Those were the two terrorist organizations. And after Britain had taken over Ottoman Palestine and started letting Jews in, they wanted to limit a certain amount because there was 600,000, 700,000 Palestinians living there, which you don't ever hear because they used that. They came up with a clever term. They said a land for a people without a land. And they tried to make it like back then that there was nobody that lived there on Palestine.
It's just empty.
And people
It's an empty lot.
People even try to say that Palestine didn't exist. And it's like, there's so much information regarding that says just the opposite, that it's an insult for them to say that. There's old maps. I've got all kinds of books. Most of the books I read from are from Jewish authors, and I do that purposely. And they talk about Palestine all the time. It obviously existed going way back. I think Tacitus or one of the old philosophers even talked about it. But sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here.
No,
Where was I going with that?
Connections with Nazis and stuff, possibly.
Oh, yes. I was just saying that I think they have kind of the same ideas. I was going to talk about the Stern Gang and the Irgun. So they got pissed off, the Zionists, because Britain was limiting the amount of Jews who could go in there. And so they started attacking the Brits who had just freed them, basically, or helped them in their endeavors. And so they were dropping bombs and killing British soldiers.
What?
King David Hotel bombing, which killed I think 91 people. And if you look at today, there's all kinds of, the president always goes over to the King David Hotel to do his press conference when he goes over to Israel almost every time. But it destroyed half the hotel. They bombed an officers club. They bombed a prison. They did all kinds of stuff. They actually had a plot to kill, I think it was President Truman, if I'm not mistaken. But that was, they foiled that plot. There was another plot to bomb Parliament, British Parliament, And the guy they tried to pay off was a Brit. And he actually told the authorities what they were trying to do, so they didn't get that one pulled. But that just goes to show you how they do not care what they do as long as they get this land. It's like, it's an obsession with this land. And quickly too, I want to say, they talk about Nazis, and the term blood and soil, I guess, was like a popular term back in those days. And I know this libertarian guy a few years ago, blanking on his name, but he was the head of the Mises Institute, and he wrote an article, and it mentioned blood and soil, and there's nothing racist about it at all. He was just saying that's what people care about a lot, even today. And they called him a Nazi, but that's all they care about. That's what they care about, and they just push that on everybody else. And it's like, that's all you care about is your people and that land. And you don't care what happens to these other people. So it's just one of the old things of, I point to you, but that's what I am,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was even, I was kind of basically thinking what David White had posted in the chat over here. A quote by someone else, or Zionism is nothing else than uncritical acceptance of German-inspired nationalism. And like, just going by like the sounds of it, it just, to me, sounds like just like another version of nationalism.
It is. It's very nationalist.
I'm like, but then that's what you were saying the Nazis.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm working on a show about Bolshevism, and even going way back then, to the Bolshevik Revolution. I mean, most of the top guys in the Bolshevik Revolution were Jewish. It's just it is what it is. And, of course, everybody knows Lenin and Trotsky and Marx and all that, but it was so many more than that. They had, to be such a small population, part of the population, they had a huge presence in Bolshevism. Excuse me, I need a drink here.
You're okay. I know how it is.
And even communism, of course, too, which is basically Bolshevism, but a little bit different. But one of the guys I read a lot about, Professor Gershom Scholem, he's like the premier professor of Jewish mysticism. And like, he's dead now, but he wrote all these great books about it. And his brother, I was looking into it one day, I just kind of stumbled into it. His brother was the leading, he's the leader of the Communist Party of the USA. So, it's just kind of weird how these things connect. But they've always had a fascination with communism, socialism, and seems like fascism as well. They just up until World War II, that all kind of went away because they're, Hitler took all the, I guess he sucked all the air out of the room. And and people don't even know that Jabotinsky, in fact, you don't even hear his name very much, but somebody sent me a link. There's like 60 roads in Israel named after him. I mean, he's a huge deal. They, they have a parade every year, praising him. And I'm missing the names, but two of the first leaders of Israel, two of the first PMs were in either the Irgun or the Stern Gang, those terrorist organizations. So once you start pulling this stuff apart, it's unbelievable. And I don't think that even average Jews have a clue about this, to be honest with you. I don't think they know their own heritage. I think that they're propagandized just as much as us. And
sure.
It's for control. It's just like our government controls us through propaganda. Their leaders control them through propaganda and fear, and they want to make them feel like that there's roving gangs of white supremacists out to get them at every turn. Fear is a motivator, and it keeps people in line. It's like an invisible fence. It's like that's how they control them, and they pit them against everybody else. and they say, you can't trust anybody else, but we'll protect you. Just listen to us. We'll take care of you and protect you against those other evil people. So it's not really anything new. Our government does the same to us, but I think what makes it different is they have the religious connotation, or the religious aspect of it, rather. And that makes it even more powerful because it can be political. Zionism can be political, which it was originally, or it can be religious. And it's crazy because Israel is a place, but it's also a religion, and it's also a person. If you look back in the Bible, and if you look back at when God promised Abraham the land, it was him. He was Israel. It was one guy. And he was very clear in there that if you do not listen to me and obey my commandments, the deal's off. So, and they didn't, and they kept turning their back, and, whether you believe that or not, they kept turning their back on God time and time again. So, I kind of laugh and say, well, Moses couldn't even go up on the mountain and meet with God and get the 10 commandments without having to come back, and they're having orgies and all these idols and stuff like that. Can you imagine that coming back down? You just met with God,
Yeah.
What the hell is going on here?
Couldn't even wait 5 minutes, guys. Honestly.
You're like,
Jeez.
damn, this place really is screwed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a whole other argument too. Like, what even is Israel? Like, is Israel a land? Is Israel a group of people? You could argue Israel is Christianity, because Christianity is the fulfillment of Judaism. So therefore, Jews have zero claim to the land whatsoever, if it's physical land. I tend to believe personally, like, Israel more is a group of people that are inheritant of God's promises, etc., because of their belief. I don't believe it's physical land at all, but obviously I'm in the minority
Right.
on that issue. But yeah, it's crazy, all the interpretations, and all the 3 Abrahamic religions claim to have claim to the land, which is nuts. It's crazy.
It's such a big it's just such a big subject. I've spent hours and hours and hours on it, and there's still so much I could learn, and I get sidetracked, and because I'll go down a different rabbit hole and find out more information, and it's like, it's just never ending. But
sometimes you go down a different one just because you're getting bored of the one you're going down already.
Exactly. And I'm easily sidetracked too. So, but there's some great books like Israel Shahak was another. He was a professor at Hebrew University, like Gershom Scholem, and he wrote 2 or 3 really good books. The one is called Jewish History, Jewish Religion, and these books are getting hard to find now. But he explained going all the way back to biblical times, and right after the Second Temple destruction, how Judaism changed, and it's not really even like it was in the Bible. It turned into this rabbinical thing, was all about laws and different things like that. But I suggest people check it out because it's fascinating what he goes into, because he's very detailed.
One thing I did want to ask, I'm sure like some of the stuff in the beginning, we kind of probably, talked about it in some way already, but maybe to end it kind of, we'll talk about this for a little bit and then we'll wrap it up after this. What, I guess now, maybe it was different then, or it's still been the same thing, but like, what do you think is the point of it, or like, where is it going from here? What do you think it's trying to accomplish in today's day and age?
Well, I think they have this thing that came out of, it's this idea that came out of Lurianic Kabbalah, which was, I think, around, I want to say the 1300s is when this guy, Isaac Luria, was alive. I think it was in Spain, if I'm not mistaken. So he was a rabbi, and he kind of was like the revisionist of Kabbalah at the time. He kind of had his own idea. So all these ideas of gathering sparks of light to put back together the broken vessels and all that. This came from Isaac Luria. They call him Ari, which I guess means lion. And so he also came up with this idea called Tikkun Olam, if I'm saying that correctly, Tikkun Olam. And it's this idea of repairing the world. Okay, so this whole idea, when he came up with Kabbalah, up until that point, it was much more like a consolidated thing, and hardly anybody knew about it, just the rabbis and the priests or whatever you call them. And he made it more mainstream. And so Kabbalah kind of got mixed into the culture. And so, it's his idea of kind of went a long ways to, in Judaism as a whole, even non-religious Jews believe that they're kind of put on this earth to make the world a better place. Okay, now there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But these people in power have used this and twisted it to a whole nother thing. And so they believe that by doing all these things, creating these wars and displacement. Now, I'm not saying all of them, but I think this is the end goal with the people in charge. They think that if they rule the world and they do all these things, there's going to be chaos. But when it ends, they will be in control. They will be, led by this Moshiach, which is not a heavenly being. It's just a guy who's going to be a great leader. Their idea of the Messiah is not like, it's not supernatural, at least for most of them. He's just going to be a great leader. And the whole world would be a better place with them in charge. So to me, that's the end goal. They want to take charge of everything, the whole world, and make it good. And they think that they've been doing this through this Tikkun Olam type of thing. And I think you get back to people with a lot of power, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And these people get a lot of power, and their idea of Tikkun Olam can be really twisted and fucked up. Pardon my language, but it's.
Well, that whole concept that you just explained, Oddman, sounds so similar to the 1,000 Points of Light speech from President Bush, right? And then the concept of like order out of chaos as well. Like it's going to be good world for who?
Yeah.
Good for you, not for everybody else, right?
And they think, well, if you convert and and you're under kind of this rule of the Moshiach, we'll all love each other and read the Torah, and it can have endless meanings. So I don't even know how they can justify that, and we'll all be happy, I guess. But that's not remotely realistic whatsoever. And it's just it's really crazy that's what they're pushing. They really think that, and they think I've heard rabbis say that the killing in the Middle East is purifying the land. The blood is purifying the land over there. So,
well, like you said, it is a literal like Holocaust in that regard, because Holocaust means burnt offering, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes,
We're doing that with bombs now.
What's that?
They're just doing that with bombs right now.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. That's how they view it. And even if just the concept of keeping the old like Torah laws, a lot of it is to do with blood sacrifice, and that's how you purify sin, is through sacrificing animals and this and that. So it sort of makes sense. Like from there, I can understand the logic to an extent, but then no, at the same time, because it violates all the other basic commandments of life, I would think. But
Oddman,
you've looked into the Frankists too, right?
A little bit. I was actually just going to mention, because I saw somebody in the chat mention Shabtai Zvi and Jacob Frank. I've looked into Shabtai more, but Frank thought he was the reincarnation of Shabtai, or supposedly. And I can't remember which one of those guys said it, but they said the Moshiach will either come back, the Messiah, when things are really good or really bad. And I've also read where these rabbis are kind of saying basically that there's powers, and they won't be clear about who the powers are, but seems like they're connected to them. They are trying to create chaos so they can have order. Ordo, how's it? Ordo ab chao or something like that.
Mhm.
So it makes sense if that's what's going on, because that's the motto of either Frank or Shabtai Zvi. And yeah, those two guys were fascinating. We don't really have time to get into them now, but I would say people go on their own and check out Shabtai Zvi. Roughly half the world's Jews gave up everything to follow this guy because they thought he was the Messiah, and he ended up converting to Islam. So
it was that was
Yo, that's like the best.
the reason why I had asked that too is that even the baby in chat, I think it was who said that. Yeah, that type of Kabbalah, that Luria, whatever you were saying before, Lurianic Kabbalah. They do say that because I was like I'd never heard of it before, and I was like skimming through it as you were talking, and then I saw right here Sabbatean mystical heresies, and they say that some people do say that this Kabbalah is what Sabbatai Zevi used, Jacob Frank used.
Yeah, and there are still followers of those two guys. I think they're called the Donmei, and there's a couple of pretty outspoken rabbis who talk about that. And I guess Shabtai basically said he kind of went the opposite way as far as sins go. He said we can't know sin until we sin. So he was all about orgies and all these different things. But a really interesting part of history. And let me just mention one other thing quickly, because I'll be remiss if I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people need to check out the Chabad organization, because I think they're more than just a sect of Judaism, because they've admitted that they had an intelligence ring in the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And the leader of that, or actually the seventh Rebbe, I think, the most popular one that some say was a Messiah, he was born in Ukraine, and we see what else going on in Ukraine. But they are big pushers of the Noahide laws. And the Noahide laws are like this other set of laws that they claim were given to Noah, I guess, before the flood. And so on top of those 613 laws, there's the Noahide laws. And allegedly only 7 are for the Gentiles, except there are some sub-laws too. And I've got the book on PDF. I think it's called The Divine Code. And it was written by this group of rabbis. And they go into detail in these laws. And I'll just end with this. So one of the laws, breaking it, calls for capital punishment. And so idolatry is capital punishment. And they clearly in that book, and I've heard other rabbis say it too, say that Christianity is idolatry because of the Trinity. But Islam is not idolatry. They have the same God. It's just that the Islamists don't follow the 613 laws. So people need to understand that you had Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and others. I know Greg Abbott, this governor of Texas, which I don't trust as far as I could throw him. He signed legislation honoring and they do it under an education bill, but this seventh Rebbe of Chabad, and under that, they honor the Noahide laws. Now, that doesn't make them into law, but it respects them. So it's a step towards the Noahide laws. So I think people need to start looking into this stuff because it's happening in the background. And I'm sure those 3 guys are not the only ones that have signed stuff respecting it, but it's definitely something that they could, if they made this stuff into law, I mean, dude, if you're not a Jew, they can kill you because you're worshiping an idol. So, hey, think about it.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy that most people would be like, that could never happen here. But why are these very important men signing legislation that honors this stuff?
Why do they even acknowledge it in that case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting with that Kabbalah, too. I'm going to have to look into that. Thank you, Oddman. Give me something to look into.
Yeah, I want to do a show just on that one of these days, but I've looked quite a bit into that. And it seems like the way they kind of talk about, putting the sparks of light back together, kind of the way they explain it, it's almost like God needs them to put him back together, if that makes sense. And then they explain that he's not really, it's not a personal God like Jesus or, Buddha or something like that. He's unknowable. He's an unknowable light that they need to put back together by doing these good deeds, which puts the sparks of light back in the vessels, if that makes sense. So it's like they think God needs them to make him whole.
How strange a thought. This is so, I don't know, man.
Very weird stuff.
It's different. It's different for sure. It's so funny you brought up the Noahide thing. I actually had written that down to bring up because I was going to ask you quickly. Sorry, I know we're wrapping up. Are the Sharia laws the same as Noahide, or is that different?
Well, they're different. I remember looking into the Sharia laws a long time ago, but I can't remember much about it. But they're very similar in the way that they're very strict.
I was going to say both extreme, I think.
Yeah, probably, right? Lots of killing.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. I mean, that was a lot. That was a lot of stuff that I didn't even know about. So that was
thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah. I think it was a very packed hour and 15 minutes right there.
Absolutely.
I ran out a lot.
No, that's great. That's why I have you on.
No, it went by super fast. It was just very conversational. Like,
yeah, and there's good stuff
great.
in the chat too that had me kind of like Googling and looking and thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
awesome. I don't get to talk about this openly on a lot of shows because, like they don't want to. Like I've got a lot of people that once I started doing this, they don't call me anymore to come on. So.
Really? See, that's fucking crazy, man.
It should be the other way
Holy
around.
shit! Like, what's the?
I think so.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand how I've had that happen to me. I think it was a little bit different, but that's kind of crazy with you to like fucking people don't. Jesus, wow.
Yeah.
I think it's just.
Yo, I mean, I'm just gonna say the conspiracy community is a funny fucking place, anyway.
Right.
You can just leave that there. It's a funny fucking place, man.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
But thank you, Oddman, for always keeping it real. I appreciate that. That's what's up.
Thank you.
Teresa, before we let Oddman go, do you want to plug your show one more time?
Sure, yeah. So everyone, please check out the Spiritual Gangsters. We are live every Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern with Clown World Weekly. We try to make connections and go through the crazy together, weed through it. No stone unturned. We try.
Sure.
And also check out Midnight Mysteries, the other show that I'm on sometimes. It's a really good time. And check out my Etsy. Grab a hat. I'm almost sold out of the gray and the silver tinfoil hats. So check them out.
The green ones are really cool. She sent me a green one. I'm gonna wear it next Tuesday. I really
green
like
is
it.
my favorite. Personally.
Yeah. It's actually, I was like, damn, this is a fucking hat.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, I highly suggest it. All
Thank
right.
you.
So, thank you all who jumped in the chat. That is what's up. I really appreciate it. That's why I like to go live. And I really wanted to go live with Oddman on this topic. I figured I'd get some people to chime in and drop some of their info. And before we go, Oddman, I know I have your stuff in the bottom already and we went over it, but would you like to let everybody know where they could find your stuff or any social media you want to let them know about?
Yeah, man. Thank you guys so much. This has been awesome. So you can find me at The Oddman Out at podbean.com. And you can also find me at _ The Oddman Out on Twitter and Instagram. And in there's a link tree in the profile. So you can find, I just started a Rumble account. So I've done some videos on there. And so there's a bunch of links in there, the BitChute and stuff like that too. So yeah, thank you.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah, I have your link tree in the bottom. Definitely go check out his Twitter and Instagram. I think he has some good posts that are worth checking out. I like him. I'm a fan of him. So again, thank all the people in the chat and everybody who caught it live. That's what's up. I love it. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.